Kaylee. Thank you so much for co-hosting and co-organizing Team LIFT as always, and our co-presenters, our friends at the Toronto Arab Film Festival, which is coming up. And full disclosure, Kaylee and I are on the board, so we'll see you out there in the cinema. Always a highlight to collaborate you, whether with our joint residencies previously or like workshops like this one in particular. Most importantly today, liebe Antonia Kilian, thank you for sharing your film with us and spending 2 days in Toronto, for now virtually. We'll have to work on that. Congratulations on the other side of the river, your long form documentary debut film with this beautifully literal and metaphorical title, just being nominated for a German Film Award. So that's the highest honor that Germany gives out for filmmaking. If any of our audiences have not seen the film yet, and we did share it with this group, Antonia spent a year in war-torn Kurdistan, where she met 19-year-old Hala, who escaped from North Syria, ends up in the Kurdish military. After her training, she returns to her hometown as a police officer with the intention of saving her younger sisters, among others, from forced marriages. And Antonia, I think you just have it, or actually Kaylee has it queued up, just in case there might be one or two of you who didn't manage to watch the film yet. We can share the trailer so that you at least get a sense. Kaylee, if you want to share that.
هلا مصطفى.
أنتي ما تفريع شيء شوي.
سويت والله أول شيء من الظلمة شفته، ثاني شيء بدي أحرر كل مرض من بيتي.
إذا طلعن أي شيء يتحججون عليك، المهم يتحججون على البنت وياخذونها. جابوا من الحجارة كانوا يضربونها بالحجارة وهي قامت تشيا والدم. لو تشوفين الشغلة عجبه.
أما أول إيكو قدر نفسنا كيا جنة.
أما وضعه غير يعني أبوه بالذات عجبه يعني هلا بفكر هلا أبوكي.
ما أنا ما أعتقد إذا الفرات يجوز لداعش.
قولي لهلا بابا طال أغلى واحدة هي.
استخدم أخواته صغار. استخدموا طرق كثيرة بس يطلعون يعني. أحارب لبين ما يكون عندي، لبين ما أجيبن وأدرسن وأعيشن أحسن شيء.
خليني طاير بالمكان، أنا أعيش أحلام الزمان، سلاحي صوتي واللسان. خليني طاير بالمكان، نعيش أحلام الزمن، سلاحي صوتي واللسان.
I just wanted for you to actually see Hala's face, I guess, especially before we start. And I'll start maybe on a sort of a macro level, and then we'll zoom into the film some more. So, liebe Antonia, I want to start a conversation by addressing your many hats as a filmmaker, director, cinematographer, writer, producer. How do these realms and skills relate in your work? What does that mix afford you? And plus, I'm also interested in how the fact that you studied visual communication perhaps plays into that as well. So how do you feel your particular training and breadth of practice makes you the filmmaker you are?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me and the invitation. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I think you're right. I first studied visual communication and experimental filmmaking, and later I continued studying cinematography, like first in an art school and later in a like film school, where I was like more going deeper into cinematography. for me, it was super important to have in the first training, learning how to edit, how to write, do my own movies, direct my own movies, experiment completely free outside of the industry, which I think shaped me a lot. But it was always clear that my focus is the visual storytelling, that I will do the cinematography myself, because I actually started before I went to university at all, working as an assistant with a photographer in Berlin. So I took it from there. And also in this, my first movie I did outside film school, this one, The Other Side of the River, it was quite important that I have all these different roles, because I went to Rojava, to Northeast Syria alone to make this film. So I needed to have the skills to be able to do what I was doing. I think it would have been impossible if I would not have been trained in the many different fields, let's say. Of course, there was a team around me. Of course, I would have never been able to do this movie without my team, and specifically without the creative team, which consists of very, very talented filmmakers coming from Iran, from Rojava. One of her is based in Berlin now, but also from Syria, from Damascus. So it was a collaborative effort, but I think a lot of the push and the actual shooting, I mostly did myself and alone.
Yeah, and I will maybe in a slightly more philosophical context come back to questions of sort of individuality versus collaborative and teamwork in a minute. But when I first learned about your work while sitting on the Kassel Docfest jury last winter, you had me hooked on your website at emancipatory approaches. And I have to say, I'm intrigued by much of the terminology you use when you talk about your work. And to me, it reveals a truly internationalist and humanist thinking, which sets you apart and is quite rare. So for me, emancipatory encompasses, but goes beyond feminist positions, especially here with The Other Side of the River. You talk about political freedoms, self-determination, equity, and solidarity. So when approaching a young woman like Hala that we just saw in your debut, what does emancipatory mean? Hook it to this film and this person. How does it manifest in the film? And maybe also, what does it mean to Hala? Because you spent a year with her.
Yeah, I think the wish to connect with an emancipatory movement, which I perceived that the Kurdish women's movement is like this, was the initial idea, my motivation to go there. So I went there. I went out of Berlin, out of this country here. I went to the war in Syria, let's say, in a quite risky terrain, because I really wanted to connect with this Kurdish women's movement and see what kind of an alternative they are able to offer, or they are offering specifically for young women or women of any ages, actually. So I came there to explore this promise of women's revolution and freedom, and to build an alternative. And of course, not me, myself, individually alone had this idea. Yes, I went alone, but I was part of a movement, like a political movement, which was in solidarity and consider themselves as internationalists, to go there as a political person, to connect with another political movement, to support each other, learn from each other, empower each other. So I think it was, yeah. So this was about my motivation, why I went there. For Hala, of course, it's a completely different story. She is a woman who was, when I met her first time, 19 years old. So she was quite young. I was 30 when I went there. She was 19. She's Arabic, like an Arab woman. And she was born in a small village close to the city of Minbij, which is on the west side of the Euphrates, in northeast Syria. And Minbij was a city, was one of the very first cities which was rising up against Assad dictatorship in the beginning of the Syrian revolution. So it was one of the big centers of the revolution, which were able to, let's say, kick out Assad and build their own council structures and organized as a city themselves. Quite soon, ISIS, the Islamic State, or Daesh in Arabic, took over the city. And then Hala was like experienced, I think it was two and a half, almost 3 years of this quite brutal rule of ISIS. Many of her family members were joining ISIS, fighting for them, dying, fighting for them. I mean, many young men got recruited in this time. And she comes from a quite, let's say, traditional family from the countryside. So her father tried to marry her off to a guy whom she didn't want to marry. And this was the moment when she decided to leave her family, to run away from her family and join the Kurdish forces, because they just had taken over the city of Minbij, kicked out ISIS and took over control in her city. So, and this is the moment when I met her, like 2 weeks after she ran away from home. She just had arrived to this military forces. She just got trained as a policewoman in an academy, together with amongst like around 60 quite young women. And yeah, this is where I met Hala for the first time. So her motivation, or to go there, to be where I met her and to connect with the Kurdish women's movement, is a completely different one than mine, of course.
Yeah.
For her, it
two
was,
follow-up points. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, it was connected to the question of how to, like with this hope, at least this hope to find like a possibility, like first with this big choice to break with her family, which was a very courageous and very strong choice, and to live on her own terms. And she truly believed in the ideology of the Kurdish women's movement, which promises her to not only liberate herself, but all other women, and to like actively build an alternative for the society, for the women inside the society. So this was the moment when I met her, when she was like repeating this ideology, and really you could see she really believed in it and has like big expectations for herself.
Yeah, because for a woman like Hala, and of course many around the world, and that presents probably differently than for you and me, the emancipatory positions are life and death decisions, and like mean major life changes, also controlled by other people as they try to free themselves. And I was wondering, I have two follow-ups, but so what was it, when did you know, when you met Hala and you met others there, you know, when did you know she was your character, she was your protagonist? What was special about her?
I think what hooked me was our very first conversation. So when I met her in the academy, I had already spent, I mean, I've been like I had spent 1 month in Northeast Syria, in Rojava, and I did like a research in many different places, talking to women and trying to figure out where to make the movie, because I went there to make a movie about the women's revolution. So this was my task. And so I started with the research. And my wish and my plan was to go to the city of Minbij and to document how the Kurdish movement, let's say, take over this city and try to establish their political system in a city that have just like been ruled from Daesh for 3 years, and how they would manage to bring their like their value system into this surrounding. I found this extremely interesting, and also in many different layers, because it was also the first predominantly Arab city which they took over. So Rojava, which is the name for the Kurdish autonomous area in Northeast Syria, is mostly like on the east side of the Euphrates River until like in the north there's the Turkish border, in the east there's the Iraqi border, and it's like divided by these two borders and the Euphrates, like a triangle. And Minbij was the first big predominantly Arab city they took over on the other side of the river. So they were like expanding the territory and expanding, let's say, their political system. And I was super curious to see how this like would work. So I was searching for a woman from Minbij. And when I came to the academy, I was introduced to Hala because I was asking, is here a woman from Minbij? And then I had a conversation with Hala, and it is actually the conversation that you also can see in the movie, like the very first conversation where we sit in the grass in front of each other. She's telling me a bit, like I ask her, what's your name, where you come from, what are you doing here? And she's just like telling me that she just ran away and joined the army and blah, blah. And in the end, she's saying like, if you stay longer, I will tell you my complete story. And she like jump up, somebody's shooting, she's disappearing. So, and she's smiling at me. You know, she gave me this permission to continue filming. And she want to tell, she want to share her story for me. And this was super important for me because I have met many women there whom, like, whose story were, of course, interesting and important, but who felt not comfortable to share it in front of the camera. They shared with me, but not in front of the camera. And I would never ever film somebody who does not want to be filmed, except maybe the 1 second in the movie where there's this one man saying, stop filming me. But this was just a very, very brief encounter, which I found more funny than,
Yeah, because it does feel truly, and that's always the case in documentary, character-driven documentary filmmaking, you need to find that special person that's in a way representative for something larger than just their personal story, but they need to be a particular type of person who is fearless also in you know, disclosing things about themselves and letting you stay with them for so long, right? Exactly. And you seem to have found that with Hala.
There come many things in place. I think you first need to be interested, like in the character, like in the person, right? You need to somehow like her, even if she's maybe not likable. Or what I liked about Hala is that she is unpredictable, that she's a bit wild, that she is like not the stereotypical like Kurdish fighter with like heavy ideologically charged. Like I found she's still like searching and questioning and really a bit crazy in a beautiful way and completely unpredictable.
Yeah, it is a bit of a coming of age story as well. Yeah, just in a war-torn circumstance. I did throw a quote of yours, Antonia, into the chat. Basically, I did it so I didn't have to read it out, but now I feel that I do want to read it out because we're not going to go into that now, maybe, but perhaps somebody in the audience will have a question about it later, because you also hinted at the fact, you know, Western values, Western filmmaker goes into a culture, ethnicity, region, language that is not her own. And you've also talked about how you were, well, working with translators at the best of times, but sometimes you were just filming and you wouldn't even understand. But you, in one interview, you said, I believe that feminism and women's freedom are not Western discussions, but rather global ones. The question of ways to achieve these goals may vary by country and culture, but ultimately, these are not Western concepts. It is not for nothing that there are alliances and movements all over the world that are working towards these goals, and that can be connected because of this. In the other side of the river, it is emphasized again and again that it is not just about the women of Syria and their rights, but those women all over the world. And in a way, that gets me to my really sort of big subject, and that's solidarity. Perhaps fallen out of fashion a bit, unfortunately, I find, but an idea we find in your film on so many levels. You show sometimes lack thereof as well, but solidarity within families, right? There's Hala, so vested in her younger sisters and saving others. You show solidarity in terms of regional, ethnic, cultural, gender affiliations. And it even relates, as you hinted at, how you found your team and how you worked with your team. So I have a sense that the idea of global political solidarity is important to you and maybe impacts how you choose your projects and your topics. You do your own films, but you're also a DOP on other filmmakers' projects, and perhaps you can speak about that solidarity factor or idea for Antonia Kilian and tease that out also by revealing and teasing a few current or upcoming projects. I know you've worked in Ghana recently. You are, if I remember correctly, working on a Kurdish women's topic, but set in Germany in the refugee community. So how does this continue for you, solidarity and your political stance in your filmmaking?
Yeah, I think it's deeply connected. And yeah, I'm collaborating with other filmmakers in different positions. So in Ghana, I was as a cinematographer with my friend Mala Reinhardt, who was a German director who was doing before a quite strong documentary about racist violence from the perspective of those who were affected. And she is now working on her next documentary where she's where we were like following her best friend for 2 years already and questioning concepts of family and motherhood in different geographies between Germany and Ghana, because she's half German, half Ghanaian. And yeah, we're an all-female crew. Mala, like during the film shooting, got pregnant. Now she has like a small baby who were also part of the film, like both in front and behind the camera. So I think solidarity was part of the whole, like not only the storytelling, but also like how we collaborate with each other, how we try to find solutions for dealing with, I don't know, care issues, how to take care for the baby, how to organize the shootings around pregnancy, motherhood. These questions are quite important for like at least women who decide to have a baby and continue working in the film industry. The other project I'm producing with my production company Pink Shadow Films, and then also one of the 2 DOPs, and the director is Baha Bektash, super talented writer and director who was working on her family story, which is based around her brother's criminalization, imprisonment, and upcoming deportation back to Turkey. And from there, we are looking back at the family's exile in Germany. So the movie is called Exile Never Ends. And yeah, we are like exploring like the reasons why her brother became a criminal, and trying to connect this with also experience of inequality, structural racism, violent racist attacks they were experiencing in Germany. And yeah, so again, I would say it's
yeah, so the theme is always there, right? Yeah, it's like on-screen and off-screen solidarity, whether it comes to women filmmakers or refugees in the diaspora. Yeah, it just looms large. It's one of the many things I like about your work and how you work. You told me that you're about to go off to Greece to write. Is there anything you can tell us about that? So that's your next film, directed by Antonia, written and directed by Antonia, or?
Yeah, I hope it will be. No, I think it will be. I'm pretty sure we will make it. Again, it's a collaborative effort with like the same people I was working on the other side of the river. So I'm co-writing with Arash Asadi, Iranian filmmaker, and Sefinas Efdike, Syrian Kurdish filmmaker. And yeah, we're writing basically on a story, like our story. This is all I can say for now.
Okay, coming to a festival near us, hopefully, and then we'll talk again. As I said, I want to kind of go from the macro to the bit more micro, and I'm zooming in a bit on the workshop theme that is following after this this public talk, and one of your other concepts, and that is emotional landscapes. I find that's a really intriguing concept, especially when it comes to maybe female filmmakers and documentary filmmaking. And certainly it's there in this film, right? Following Hala, we even saw it in the trailer. We witness pain, anger, frustration, but also laughter and camaraderie, right? In these circles that they're in, these communities that they create. And maybe I have a chicken and egg question. Do you go into a project, for example, when you say you're writing one now, do you go into a project with a compass for a particular emotional focus that you want to reveal, or do you walk into constellations waiting for an emotional landscape to emerge and reveal itself as you go along? Because, you know, you are an observer and you are quite detached in a way. So I just wonder how that goes together with emotional landscapes, and whether you sometimes, maybe especially as a female filmmaker, have to sort of stand up for that concept in documentary filmmaking, that emotional access points afford us a different viewing of documentary films.
So in the beginning, you asked if it's one specific emotion I'm trying to
go for,
portray or get, or no, I don't think that this is the approach. I think it's exactly the other way around, how you said, like it's about, it doesn't start from the emotion, it starts like from somewhere else, like a more topic or theme-based research. I mean, also in the other side of the river, it didn't start with emotions, it started with like really quite analytical questions of how to build a political alternative, and how they're organized as a political movement, and how they're trying to build their structure. So it was a very like it started from somewhere else, but for me it is deeply connected to an emotional experience. That's why I also decided to make this like a dramatic like dramaturgy for the film, rather than an open dramaturgy, to like choose one protagonist, have a quite classical dramaturgy, actually like a almost super classic 3-act dramatic movie, like with one protagonist, and it's her story and her journey. So for me, it was in the other side of the river, it was really important to connect with Hala's experience and how she experienced the world, and what she feels when she joins there, how she feels when she comes back to the city of Münbit, when she's part of the police force, and through her experience and through her through her emotional landscape, to unveil the bigger landscape, the bigger questions, the more analytical, dialectical questions, which like come up through her story, because they are all in her story. You know, I could also like write more whatever, like I could have also written a text about what I'm thinking, what are like the contradictions I see in the movement, what is the ideology, or how does it clash with the reality, where does it work, where do I see some like limitations, where I see emancipatory moments, where I see more oppressive moments. You know, all this is like inside the movie. You could write it as a journalistic piece, or you can show it through some young woman's experience. which is an emotional one, of course. So, and I think the same goes for the next movie, which will be like in different geographies between Syria, Germany, Greece, connecting our 3 life experiences, asking big questions about our like current times or this age of extremes, how we can call it. But again, through I don't know, through our emotional experience and how we feel living in these times and in these places and going through all the experiences we went through or will still go through. I don't know if I
Yeah, I'll
answered.
follow. Yeah. And maybe I'll kind of go a bit deeper, and that's sort of, and then we'll open it up for audience questions if there are any. But one quality that your film has been praised for specifically is that it shows and allows for complexity and contradictions. You have a pretty clear political standpoint that one can read as subtext or read up on. But what I also found intriguing, how this is not a partisan film, right? You also talked about propaganda, because you're surrounded by contradictory propaganda from all sides, right? Like one can have whatever political standpoint. When I grew up in Germany in the 80s and 90s, I lived in student residencies, and literally all my neighbors and all my friends were PKK at the time. And it's a type of propaganda, whether you condone it or whatever, but it's propaganda, right? So I was just wondering how you for yourself deal with that, also because the last few weeks we had the Hot Dogs Film Festival here. I watched several of the Ukraine-based films, and that's a topic right now as well, right? Like Johnny Depp going to Ukraine to do documentaries. But how do you, I want to say nearly inside of yourself, deal with, your own positions, your own experiences and baggage that you bring, because you make political films, to make sure that that you keep these contradictions, bring them out and embrace them, and not in a way make it for lack of a better term, partisan film. Because we see a lot of very personal filmmaking, and I think there's a difference between personal but still, pass pro toto, and I think that's pretty much what you described, that you found a character and a story, but it's an example of something bigger, a bigger story you want to tell. How do you balance that? How do you have checks and balances for yourself in a way where you go like, oh, Antonia, maybe I'm veering off a bit. Maybe I need another perspective. I need another commentary by another character. Is that something you do in your filmmaking?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think we're all like surrounded by propaganda. I think it's not just like of some specific whatever left-right movements. I think it's everywhere, and it's just like nice term for like advertisement, or like or different term for advertising, like a concept, let's say, can be political, can be different one. But of course, in a war zone, propaganda is like a super important tool of warfare. And in a country like Syria, which is a dictatorship, it has like a very long tradition to like, I don't know, it was like very difficult to make films inside Syria since a long time, because it's completely controlled by the state. Like cinemas were shut down. Like the whole cinema production was like censored, and like there the meaning of propaganda may have maybe a different one, like something very specifically connected to an experience of dictatorship and a one-party rule system. And also the PKK or Rojava has a very specific ideological approach, let's say, to politics. And it's something I was, of course, intrigued and interested in. And it was my idea to start from there, like to introduce the propaganda, the ideological ideas of the ideology of this party or women's movement, or however you want to call them, in the framework of an academy. So I was searching for what I then also found, and where I also found Hala, like an academy space where women get trained in the ideology of the women's movement. So to introduce this in the beginning of the movie, and then follow one of the women outside and see how this ideology clashes with the reality. So what of this is working, what of this is not working, or how the real life looks like, you know, like ideology is something interesting and beautiful, and it sounds amazing to liberate a woman or to make a revolution, or all these things sound so good, at least to me. But then how to implement them in reality, and what does this mean in reality? It's a completely different story. So this was my idea, but I went there as a white German woman alone, without speaking Kurdish, Kurmanji, without speaking Arabic, and then finding this Arab young woman whom I cannot communicate with because I don't understand her language. I was just there for 1 month and deciding to make a movie about the women's revolution in Rojava. So very humble, I would say. Very humble. No, I was like, of course, like, I don't know. I was so curious. I really wanted to find out, but I was, of course, also immediately understanding that this is too big for myself to do it alone. So after I found Hala, my whole attention and focus was to build a team around me, like how I can handle this. So my first is like, actually, I just wanted to stay there for some weeks and then return and continue filming. So my first decision was, okay, I have to live here for a good amount of time to make the movie, because I will never ever be able to make this from Germany. Of course not. Like, I have to be there in order to find out all these questions I wanted to find out. So I stayed for 1 year there and followed Hala's life. But what was super important to find the right people who supported me in making this movie. So the first person I found was Sefinas Evdike. She herself is a filmmaker, and woman from Northeast Syria, a Kurdish woman who was born there, grew up there, who studied for a while filmmaking in Eastern Turkey, and then came back shortly after the revolution, and was quite involved in the women's movement and in, like, let's say, the political idea of Rojava from an filmmaker's perspective. So she's one of the co-founders of a film collective that's called Kumina Film a Rojava, who had this idea to bring back film culture to their region. So they were reopening cinemas, they were organizing film screenings, they were translating films into Kurdish, because it was also the first time, like, the revolution in Rojava was also like mainly maybe a cultural revolution for the Kurdish people, because they were like always oppressed in the Syrian Ba'ath system. So they were not allowed to speak their language, to read their books, to watch their movies. It was all like oppressed. The dance is everything. So the whole culture. So they were like translating international movies with Kurdish subtitles, organizing film screenings, reviving the cinema culture, let's say. But then they also started to teach filmmaking. So they opened an academy and they opened a production house. So they are producing actually quite big and successful fiction and documentary films, which were running on festivals around the world. Like a big one was called, Jibo Azadir, The End Will Be Spectacular is the subtitle, about the war in Kobani. Another one Sefinas just shot, this is fiction about 3 women which, like her long debut fiction film. So Sephinas was one of the first person I met there, and I moved in her house. Like I was basically living with her for 1 year, and she was very closely involved in the production of the movie and helping me a lot. So your question was how I was like able to navigate the question of what is propaganda, blah, blah, all this, like how to make it a more complex movie. So that's why I'm telling you all this, because it was not me alone. There was like a very capable team behind me who were like helping me, teaching me, and making me understand the situation better, to come out of my quite, let's say, my own quite ideological bubble, and to see a more complex reality. The second person was Arash Asadi, whom I already mentioned. He is an Iranian filmmaker who came there himself as a filmmaker and was part of this film collective. He is my co-author and the editor of the movie. So we were editing this movie, or he was editing the movie together with me. And he played a super important role in having a very critical perspective on the political situation. And then when I returned to Germany after 1 year, I met Gevara Namer. She is a Syrian Kurdish filmmaker, but from Damascus, the capital. And she's in exile in Germany, and she was part of the Syrian revolution against Assad, and having also a bit more, it's a very different topic I'm now touching, but like the Syrian revolution and the Rojava revolution, they have some issues, like there's like, they're having some distance from each other, because the Syrian revolution is saying that the Rojava revolution is collaborating with Assad, let's say, or there's some kind of collaboration. So Guevara is coming from the Syrian revolution, so having again a much more critical perspective on the whole political situation and landscape, and she became one of the producers and also a co-author. With her I returned for another shooting. So I had these people around me who were like teaching me a lot, but also were deeply involved in the creative process of making this film and navigating the whole political landscape.
Well, yeah, thank you for that sort of very structural answer, but I think that's important. And I think maybe my first or second question to you, I said, oh yeah, maybe we'll hint at sort of the way you work in your team and where your values, solidarity, collaboration, multiple voices kind of are reflected on a meta level, again, even in your filmmaking. And you just gave that answer. So thank you so much for that insight and all the other insights you've already given us. Kaylee, are there any audience questions? Otherwise, I would have definitely a sort of a wrap up one. We have 10, 15 more minutes.
Yeah, we haven't received any questions yet, but so if anyone has anything, please put it in the chat. Happy to read out loud to everyone. Again, message me if you'd like, but yeah, we are going to wrap things up in a few minutes. So.
Yeah, I mean, many of you will have the chance to dig deeper with Antonia in the 2-day workshop portion that she that follows this talk. But while we're maybe keeping an eye on the chat and waiting, if anybody has a particular question for Antonia right now, I have to ask it. It's always a popular question. If there's a very engaging character that drives a documentary, and especially if it's a character that is, you know, in a way in peril. So I know audiences, including myself, sometimes want to know, so what happened to Hala, right? So she was 19 when you met her, then came the filming process, then came the editing. And I know you are occasionally in touch with her, so maybe you just want to update us where also, you know, the fight is right now and the Kurdish women's movement, but particularly Hala, who's now what, 23?
Yeah, 23 she should be. So yeah, I think she's still more or less in a similar situation like in the end of the movie. So she still did not return to her family, but she is also not married. She refuses to marry. So she's living with a friend, not the same friend, but a different one, in the same city, which is still under the control of the Kurdish forces. There were attempts by the Turkish military and the Turkish President Erdogan to take over the city. But yeah, this did not happen yet. But there's always this fear, like when, let's say, a new war would break out and Turkey would invade. The city of Serikaniye, where the academy is in the beginning of the movie, was already like occupied by Turkey. So this academy doesn't exist anymore. And also the place where I lived for 1 year in Sefinas, my friend's family house, is destroyed. So this is gone. A small side note, in my city in Germany, there's the factory that is producing the tanks with which the Turkish army was bombing the house where I was living. So yeah, and I think like politically it's quite tense at the moment. So when I was there, it was more calm, and right now it's they, as I said, like they fear, and the tensions are rising that the Turkish military will invade, and it's a big question what will be the future of this political project, and if they can survive.
Yeah, which has always been the quagmire for Kurdistan, right? Because they really kind of are surrounded by bad options in a way politically. Hala has not considered leaving the country, like applying for refugee status in the EU, or
not that it's working like it's not that you apply from there and then you're there. So you need
no, but that she would go maybe with your help.
Yeah. It's a very difficult, very dangerous, and very expensive way to get smuggled to the European Union. But she was never considering this because she wanted to stay close to her sisters.
Yeah.
We do have one.
There were like we were.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
we do have a question from the audience, which actually relates to this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to read it out, Kate?
Sure. I just thinking that it connects to what you guys are talking about, but were there any security or safety issues that you or the subjects in the film had to deal with, which you guys have already touched on, but might want to expand a little bit more?
Yeah, there had been quite a lot security and safety issues. I mean, it's a war zone. I've never been to the front line, but still it's a war zone. And the city of Minbij, where I was filming with Hala, was especially unstable in the beginning when the Kurdish forces took it over from ISIS. They were like, their power there was not yet fully established, so they were not in a very strong situation. There were still like ISIS cells inside the cities, sometimes explosions happening or attacks on the police station, when also I was there, but I decided to not have this like in terms of production, it was very difficult. It was very complicated to handle these things. But in terms of storytelling, I didn't want to focus on this at all. Like I could have easily make it more like going into this direction to show more actually war activities in terms of fighting or explosions or whatever. But I was not interested at all in this. For me, it was really about this, political movement and trying to understand how they can open up an space where a woman can live a life on her own, or like a self-determined life. But sometimes there had been also like attacks, let's say, in areas where it was completely unexpected, like the front line was in the west, and on the border to Iraq there was no front line. Like there was like the war was completely over, and there was researching in an in a military archive, because I was really interested to see like videos from the days when they were fighting and taking over the city, like the weeks just before I have arrived. So I was going to the archive, watching all these videos, and in the night I left the hill and sleeping in a village next to it. And in the night there had been like a bomb attack on this hill, and the complete archive was destroyed and gone, and everybody was dead who was working there. And the next morning I was standing there and was like just like rubbled, everything was gone. So, and this was really unexpected because it was so like it was really far away from the front line. And
Yeah,
and I think for Hala it was also a big question, and it still is. Of course, her safety was like, we were super worried about her safety. Like it's also part of the movie. Like she was worried all the time, like because she got this threatening letters from her family that she should quit the army, return home. And of course I was worried, and we were all worried that something might happen, and how her family would react. And I was also extremely worried if the release of the movie would be of any harm to her. And I think this for me is the my weakest point in this whole production, because this is something you cannot really control. I mean, people were like assuring me, she was again and again and again assuring me that it's okay and no problem, and I'm exaggerating, but still it could be, it might be. So yeah, that's another reason why I'm constantly in contact with her. Like she's okay, she gets her like share of the prize money and everything, so she's okay, but still it's a war zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Leah, for that question, because I was just going to sort of prompt you, and then you got there, because it is the immediate physical danger in your particular case while shooting, but then there's also the responsibility of the filmmakers team towards their characters as this goes on. And I've, over the last couple of months, I've increasingly seen that. I just had a German filmmaker here. I was talking with her about her previous movie, and she was like, oh, unfortunately, it just got pulled after years of being screened, because the subject of the film, also set in the Arabic world, had concerns that it would negatively impact her.
With the mobile phone, Saudi runaway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and of course that's the prerogative of protagonists too, who trust you as creators and filmmakers to get out of that. Yeah, just last night, literally, I was kind of trying to curate a film series with a specific focus, and I dug into the Goethe-Institut's archive. We do have our own film archive, and buy global rights, and I came across three new films, German produced, that I wanted to show, and all had, of course, had several countries where the film couldn't be screened, and it became quite obvious which countries those were and why. But it also had literally notices now underneath in our own catalog, in our database, that said, please be mindful, this is not a rights question, this is a safety and security question. Please make sure you do not screen these films in these geographies that are listed here as blocked for the protection of the protagonists, which then frankly got me to think, even for us to show them, for example, on an online platform, even if we are technically in Canada, but if I give them out to a festival without geo-blocking, am I endangering, as a curator, am I endangering a protagonist by showing certain films? It's a really tricky area these days.
It's super important question.
Yeah,
and it's
responsibility.
Really, absolutely. With the online screening, I mean, most festivals are geo-blocked, so this is safe. But I know so many productions where like the protagonists demand that the film would not be screened in their area, because it would have like put them in difficulties with like either their families.
And I mean, even if it's geo-blocked, exactly, we would have to assume then that there's no foreign communities and foreign agents working in our countries, which of course is not okay. Now we have two questions coming in. Are you working as an independent filmmaker? That's important, and we'll bridge into the, and then Chris Gaiman is saying, I'm thinking again about the question of focusing on a representative individual versus trying to create a broader portrait of an institution along Fred Wiseman lines. In certain respects, I feel like the documentary world's focus on characters and narrative arcs is quite conservative, not necessarily in a strictly political sense. Could you reflect on the positive and negative aspects of these different approaches? Yeah.
Sure. I start with the independent film.
You can read it up in the chat.
Yes,
character driven is the way to go right now, but yeah, is it maybe conservative in terms of filmmaking?
So yes, I'm an independent filmmaker. I also like, there was nobody in this project, there was nobody, let's say, like I had the final saying in all creative and content matters. There was like the final cut was with me. And I'm also one of the co-producers, so I also have like a saying about the production, where it will be screened, about the whole contract. So I also did the contracts with the crew, and I was also part of raising the money, and I was co-producing with my own production company. So this film is financed by public film funding in Germany, a bit in New York from Tribeca Film Fund, and we had Finnish money involved. Yes, absolutely. That's what I meant. Like, it's maybe not a very revolutionary approach in terms of storytelling to make a character-driven, dramatic drama around one protagonist about the revolution. I get confronted with this question a lot, and indeed, I was considering having many, like not many, but I was considering doing it a different, like having a different approach, an open structure, fragmentaric, like not having one character but different places, different, more like many women experiencing something, or yeah, like to portray like a variety, or like having also like in the form and the content, like this collective idea of a revolution, let's say, and maybe like also like for the women's movement, or if you want to, like, okay, in this case it was not the women's revolution, it was more the police station in Minbij. You could have also focused, or we could have focused on this police station, the building, the people coming in and out, what's happening in this building, going a bit with the commander, going with the other commander, going in the basement where there was a prison full of ISIS prisoners. It could have been also like an interesting way to tell the story, but we came back, and that's why I was explaining it before, that for us to unfold the contradictions and mainly the contradictions in the revolution, or the ideology, or the empowering and oppressive parts of the ideology, or the situation, and the difficulties. For us, it was, or at least we saw only to make it possible through Hala's story, which doesn't mean it was not possible to tell it in a different way, but I was not able to do it or to get it in a different way on my SD card, like to film it in a different way, because I was limited, I was not there totally under control, fluent in Arabic and Kurdish, and with a big not, or even small budget, you know, like when I was filming there, I had no budget at all. Like I was completely financing the filming myself. Most of the time I was without a translator. So I was more the fly on the wall, following the situations. And of course, this is much more easy if you have one character whom you try to come as close as possible, and through her experiencing the situation. And Hala was quite good for this. I mean, of course, I had no idea that this, what happened in the end, would happen. Like, it was totally unexpected. But of course, this was very like strong catalyst to address all the questions I had at that moment, also myself. But definitely,
Yeah,
you can
do a
like,
whole session on that. And you are making, remember the first, when I asked about your hats, you are trained in, and you've made experimental films. You're making experimental films, you're making essay films, from what I understand. So yeah, you have the repertoire, right? But now we're actually getting a lot of questions that are already quite specific about camera and audio setup and funding, etc. Understandably and very validly. Kaylee, I'm just wondering whether those are also participants that will be in the workshop, because those sound like filmmaker and very specific filmmaker and workshop questions,
I was
right?
just gonna
So
say,
maybe we want to take those over, transfer those over into the next session.
Yes, thank you
That
so much.
leaves me then, yes, to also say thanks to all of you again. And Antonia, in 4 weeks' time, we will know the German Film Awards will be announced. So fingers crossed for the other side of the river, and Pink Shadow Films for yet another honor. And you're doing the cinema tours right now. When we were talking before, you were traveling across Germany because the film is screening widely, which is beautiful. So thank you for that, and can't wait for your next film. And can't wait to actually have you in Toronto at some point.
Yeah,
everybody else, please enjoy the workshop. And again, thanks to LIFT and Kaylee for organizing that so well.
Yes, thank
Take
you
care.
so much again. And so we are going to have, for those of us who are joining us for the workshop, we are going to still take that 10-minute break, even though we've gone a little bit over. There are still some spots available in the workshop. So if folks would like to join, please email me at development@lift.on.ca, and I can send you the Zoom link. We have 2 spots left, so first come, first serve kind of thing. But Antonia, thank you so much for your insights. Jutta, thank you for moderating. Thank you to the Toronto Arab Film Festival for co-presenting. Thank you for joining us, everyone, on what turned out to be a really beautiful afternoon. So thank you, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you in 10 minutes, workshop participants and Antonia. Alrighty.